Good evening, everybody. My name is John Vaida, and I am the Executive Director of the Northeastern Pennsylvania Chamber Music Society, whose mission is to foster the growth of chamber music in the Northeastern Pennsylvania region. Welcome to the fifth and final installment of our Fall Music Matters series. Tonight's workshop is made possible by a grant from the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts and from the generous support of our patrons. If you enjoyed tonight's program, we hope you will consider making a donation so that we can continue to bring you quality programs such as these free of charge. For more information on NEPACMS, our Music Matters series, or to make a donation, please visit www.nepacms.org. Also on our website, you can sign up for our next Saturday's broadcast, November 21st at 7 p.m. We will be broadcasting a concert of trios for violin, viola, and piano. Joining me on stage will be Amy Iwazumi on violin and viola, and Rick Hoffenberg on piano. Please note that tonight's workshop is being recorded for possible rebroadcast at a later date on the NEPACMS website and for the New York State Music School Association virtual conference. For those of you that have only gotten to know me as a host for the Music Matters series, I'm also a violinist, violist, conductor, and teacher. I'm on the faculty of Mansfield University and Wilkes University, as well as artists in residence at Wyoming Seminary, a small private boarding school here in Northeastern PA. In the summers, I'm on the faculty of the Killington Music Festival in beautiful Killington, Vermont. And I should note, before the pandemic, I was also traveling the country playing concerts. Again, thank you for being here. So for tonight's format, again, those of you who have been on these Music Matters workshops in the past, I want to talk to you. I mean, this is a subject I'm happy to spend hours talking myself, but again, if you have any questions, please feel free to stop me at any time. With that said, there's a couple ways you can do that. You can raise your hand, and for those of you that might not be familiar with Zoom, in order to do that, if you go down to, on the bottom menu, you click on Participants, and then you go to the lower right-hand corner, and it says Raise Your Hand, and I'll be checking that periodically. So if you raise your hand, I will call on you, and then you can lower your hand. Or conversely, if you want, you can send a chat message, and I can ask your question that way. Also, just as I think for your ease, I do have, as you see, two screens here, and I'm going to share momentarily with you a PowerPoint presentation. I think the best thing would be to do is to, in your settings, if you put it on the side-by-side speaker view. That way you'll be able to see both screens. All right. So the title of this presentation, Broken Bows. Well, why broken bows? And you'll very quickly see what that title is referring to. Fundamentals are such an important part in string playing, as of course we all know. And this way of approaching bow division is really aimed not just for the beginner, but musicians of all levels. And you might hear my dog in the background right now. That's Yoshi. He might come visit us, hopefully tonight too. So, my teacher at Eastman, Zvi Zeitlin, had many sayings. One of which he kept reiterating every single lesson was, technique is conception. Right? You have a conception of how you want something to go, and then you use technique to fulfill that conception. I think a lot of times we think of technique as just the mechanical aspect of lifting our fingers or how we draw the bow. But of course, it's much, much more than that. It's about fundamentally how we make music. The other thing that he always reiterated, and another one of his sayings, true improvisation comes from precise calculation. And that's one that has really stuck with me through the years. What did he mean by that? Well, once you go and exactly calculate what you want to do with something, it actually, ironically, gives you the freedom to improvise. And that's part of what the broken bow's way of thinking about bow division is thinking about. So bowing also is fundamental for rhythm, right? You can't separate good bow division with good rhythm. I think in string playing, those two really go hand in hand. Of course, phrasing, right? And by really thinking about your bow distribution, you're thinking about your conception of the piece, how you want it to go, and then you learn to fulfill that conception in a very deliberate way. Bow distribution, though, also has implications for the left hand. Back in, I believe it was October, Dr. Theodor Buchholz of the University of Arizona was a guest, and he did a left hand workshop, and I think some of you that are on here, I think, will remember that. This is a foil to that. So left hand and right hand oftentimes, need to work together. So hopefully we all have our instruments ready and tuned. And give me 1 minute. I'm going to share my screen after our host allows me to. Amy, are you there? There we go. There we go. Okay. Broken bows. Methodical approach to bow distribution. And I have to say, this is one other thing I've learned during this whole crazy time is PowerPoint presentations. So bear with me, I'm still new with this. Hone your skills, hone your right arm skills with this methodical approach to bow division and its artistic application to repertoire. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go through some very basic exercises and then we'll apply it to a basic piece that anyone, and I have it written out for violin, viola, and even a bass player can certainly use this. So as we go through these first basic exercises, a couple things to focus on. One is having a consistent contact point. And let me just explain what contact point is because it's sometimes different terms are used. You might have heard of heard it referred to as sounding point. Same thing. So contact point, where your bow meets the string, so whether it's close to the bridge or close to the fingerboard. All right, that's the contact point. So for this, we're going to have a consistent contact point in the middle, right between the bridge and the fingerboard. So we're also going to pay particular attention to having a straight bow. And again, what I mean by straight bow is that the bow is parallel to the bridge as opposed to being, at an angle this way or that way. All right? And one thing you'll find with these exercises is that it will help with that, especially in the third point, in the extremities of the bow, at the frog and at the tip. And you probably all are aware too, those are the 2 points in the bow that are most problematic for consistently drawing a straight bow. So these first exercises are going to be played always forte, always very staccato. I actually have marcato marks on them. We'll repeat each bar twice, and a metronome marking of 60. I say 60 just as a starting point. Really though, you can feel free, take these as you will and vary the speeds. Okay. So, again, hopefully we're all tuned, ready to go. And hopefully we're all muted too, so we don't get a cacophony of open strings. So we're going to start from our top strings and work down. All right? I will just demonstrate the first exercise and the way to be played just on an open string, and then we'll I'll try that together. So just on open A. Okay, and you notice when I'm doing that, I'm thinking about a couple things. One is to divide the bow equally into the 4 different parts. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I suggest is not thinking 4 different divisions of the bow, but rather thinking bottom half, 1, 2, and then dividing the top half, 1, 2. All right, so let's all try that very first exercise together. So starting on your top string, repeating each bar, and then going on to the next measure. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, so how did we do? Pretty simple. You can give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. Again, feel free to raise your hand if you want to ask any questions. So I mentioned, the frog and the tip are the most problematic places. And a couple things I've noticed that just kind of hold true from the years of playing and certainly, but also teaching, is that especially violinists and violists, we have a tendency when we place the bow on the string at the frog to do this, right? And if you look at yourself in the mirror, you'll notice that this bow isn't straight, right? So one thing I can suggest for violinists and violists at least is instead of approaching the string like you're mixing soup, I don't know if you've ever been taught to mix soup when you're playing, and doing this, instead feel like you're coming from below and up to place the bow. Okay. Then the other problem is at the tip, and again, this is I think holds true for violin, viola, and I think probably cello as well. And I see Dr. Buchholz is there, and he can correct me if that's not the case. But when we get to the tip, we want to do this as well. So to counter that, you want to think out, like you're pushing out on a door, right? Or you're pushing somebody away that you don't like. Out of the tip, very slightly. Okay. So let's just try that exercise again. And once more, really paying attention to bow direction. And this is where Zoom can be really helpful. If you have your screen on yourself, you can watch if your bow is straight or not. So let's try that one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. So how did we do? Pretty good still, right? Okay. So the next step with this is to try different bow divisions. So instead of groups of 4, let's try groups of 6. So we're going to divide again the bottom half into 3. 1, 2, 3, and then top half into 3. 1, 2, 3. And then going back as well. So let's give that a shot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. let's get a little bit crazy. Let's try 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, and again, top half. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6, 7, 8. Good. How did that go? A little bit harder? Yeah? So we'll just try one more perhaps, and you again can experiment with this. You know, there's no reason why you shouldn't, and I think you should actually do other bow divisions. 3s, of course, definitely, 9s, but also 5s, 7s, anything. I mean, feel free to be creative as you want with this, but let's just go for it and try 12s. Okay, so again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the top half again in 6. Perhaps though, in the interest of time, we're just gonna do one. We won't take the repeat, so we'll play E string 12, then A string 12. Okay, but do go ahead and repeat these in your practicing. All right. 9, 10, 11, 12. So that is the first basic exercise. The next one, and we're going to go back to groups of 4, is to do the same thing except with tenutos. So you're going to still visually divide the bow in the same way you just were, but we're going to sustain the sound. And again, I'll demonstrate this just on open A. Alright, so just drawing a consistent speed with your bow, but pulsing with the fingers. Alright, so let's go to the beginning of this, and my apologies, I didn't write in the repeat signs, but we will repeat each measure. 1, 2, 3, 4. Go a little bit harder. Yeah, can you feel, actually one of my students, someone who I haven't seen for a very long time, was brought this up this week in a lesson about, sometimes you might get that chattery bow, or finding a kind of a kink in your bow or kink in your arm. This is a good way of helping to get rid of that and seeing exactly where that's happening. So let's try the same exercise. Again, we're going to divide it in 6s. So same thing in 6s. 4, 5, 6. used to this still. Let's see. Question from Suze. You had a question?
Yes. Yeah. I just wondered how you would describe making the tenuto happen, because I don't see anything happening in your wrist. Is it like a pressure with your index finger, or what's making it happen?
I'm gonna do the old school zoom here, so you can see. So this is something we might all try together too. If you put your bow in the middle, right in the middle of your bow, and then just very gently press down and feel the counterbalance between your thumb and your index finger. I call these push downs. Just very gently. All right, that's basically what's happening to control those pulses. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Does that answer your question then? Right. Okay. So let's keep going. We'll do again one more. We'll try the eighths. And again, though, in your practicing, feel free to be as creative with the numbers as you want. All right. Eighths. 1, 2, ready, and. Probably feel as you start to do those smaller or larger divisions, you know, the increments of those pulses get smaller and smaller, and it gets harder and harder, right? So this brings us to the next exercise, which is something I'm sure you've all done, is just sustain tones. All right, and this is one of the big benefits to practicing the broken bow method. All right, ironically, those short detached notes and these pulses will help create an even sustained tone. So let's try the sustained tones. Again, forte, still repeating each measure, and around 60. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we're going to do the sixes first. One other thing I should probably mention too, be very aware of what your shoulders are doing during these exercises. All right, the natural tendency for all of us is that when you get to the frog, is that you want to hunch the shoulders. Okay, so really being aware of what your body's doing is important here. Right, so trying to keep this area as relaxed as possible. Okay, so let's go to the sixes. 4, 5, 6. 2, 3. So I kind of think of this as a bit like doing push-ups. At first, 10 might be a struggle, right? But the more you do them, the better you get, and you can maybe do 15, and then maybe 20, okay? The same thing I think with bow division. If you find that, 6 is a bit of a struggle, that's okay. Go back to the broken method and start to build upon that. Then you might find after doing that, in a week, probably not even, 6s will be fine. Then you can go on to 8s and kind of repeat that process. Very legendary story. Apparently, Joseph Gingold, who was the teacher of many great violinists, including Joshua Bell, apparently could sustain each bow for 3 minutes. That is quite a feat. But I think 1 minute is certainly not out of the question for most of us. All right? So challenge yourself. See how far you can go. It'll only make you a better player and more in control of your bow. So let's do maybe 1 or 2 more. Let's go to the 8s. And again, always still dividing 4 in the lower half, 4 in the upper half as you do this. 5, 6, 7, 8. Good, and again, in the interest of time, we'll try 12. However, we'll, again, only take one bow per string, so we won't repeat the bars. So, divisions of 12. 9, 10, 11, 12. 10, 11, 12. Again, go for it in your practice room and see how far you can take that. Okay. No questions from anyone else so far? We'll keep going. All right. So the natural next step is to apply this to scales, right? I've written out just the first several measures of the D major scale here. But again, this works on any scale, including double stops. We'll again go back to the 4s. So we'll play the D major scale ascending, and then when we get to the top octave, we'll repeat the octave and come back down. All right, so D major. And if you feel comfortable with another scale right now, again, you're the only one that's going to hear it, so feel free to play whatever scale you want. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so then the next step would be to play that in the sustained version. So we'll try that with the pulses, etc. So all together, 1, 2, 3, 4. And of course, then finally, a nice, beautiful D major scale with sustained tones, and feel free to add vibrato too. 1, 2, ready, and. Great. Any questions as we go forward? Yes, Sabrina, go ahead.
I was just wondering if it was natural to kind of feel, especially at the frog and the tip, if the bow was going to fall out of your hand.
Natural to feel that the bow's going to fall out of your hand?
Yeah, like it seems like at the extremums that I lose my grip as well.
Okay, good question. So I don't know if you can see the picture behind me. If I move, well, I have a couple pictures actually. Two great string players. One, of course, is Jimi Hendrix, and but the other one is Yehudi Menuhin, right? And great violinist. He used to describe a bow hold as that if you were to blow on it, it would fall out of your hand. All right. So having being loose isn't a bad thing. It's a good thing. All right. However, the bow shouldn't feel. Well, let me say it should feel secure. All right. And there's a couple things you can do. The first thing I kind of recommend people to do is just try this, and it's a good experiment for all of us, I think. If you hold your bow here, and if you just use your thumb and your index finger, okay, we'll do a little experiment here. This is a tangent, but it's a good one to get onto here. Try changing where your first finger is, your index finger. You'll find if it's too far up high, it's very unstable and it feels weird. Likewise, if it's too close to your thumb, it feels like it's going to fall down, right? So you want to find for your hand where that's going to be most natural, where that's going to feel good, right? And then just flop your fingers down, making sure your fingers are nice and rounded, pinky's curved, and bring the bow back up. All right, it should feel a little bit, hopefully more secure, but not tight. All right, you know, with the bow hold, again, this is a rabbit hole we can go down for hours, but one thing I just kind of always come back to is the perfect bow hold, and it's a very simple thing. There's one step to the process. Just go like this. That's how your fingers naturally fall and are curved. So you want to try and bring the bow to that as much as possible. All right. Sometimes you see people doing weird things, right? Their bow hold kind of looks like this, right? And it looks as uncomfortable as it probably feels. Okay. So good question. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Any other questions before we keep going with this? All right.
John, I learned some of these exercises doing it right at the bridge and trying to get that kind of sound out of it to get that connection to the bridge. Do you do anything like that?
Yeah. I was debating whether actually to put that into this or not. There's one I kind of like. I'll share it with you. I actually got this from a bass player. It sounds absolutely terrible, and I apologize in advance for it. But it's a good exercise just to learn how to relax your shoulders, relax your arms. If you place your bow, and I'm going to do this on the A string, right at the frog, and you want to feel really heavy, like you're playing down on the instrument, okay? And I think the same thing would go for a cello too, feeling like you're playing down on the instrument. And then again, I'm so sorry for the sound, but it's actually very difficult to be relaxed enough to have a very screechy, noisy bow all the way through without stopping. Because what tends to happen is, right? Because if you're not relaxed, that's what'll happen. But if you can release everything, and then go the other way too, right? That's gonna be a valuable exercise. I suggest not doing that when anyone can hear you though. Okay? So I think, what is this person doing? Do they know how to play that instrument? Yeah. Good. Was that more or less what you were thinking about?
Yeah, so I learned to kind of do that, to have a heavy arm in the string and to have a sustained gritty sound all the way across, to be able to have a consistent weight in the bow all throughout the bow from the frog to the tip. So that's kind of the context I learned it in.
Yeah. So let's all do it actually, and I'll show you what I do after we do the screechy thing. So. And again, this is one of those things that you want to see how long you can do it for. Eventually, you'll be able to sustain that longer. So just take your bow. It doesn't matter what string. You should kind of practice on all the strings. Again, I'm just going to take the A string for now. So let your arm sink into the string, really heavy, and then sustain that gritty, awful, scratchy tone. Good. And as she said, make sure you're really close to the bridge for this. I'm practically on top of the bridge. All right, and that'll also help you keep a straight bow and parallel to the bridge. So we'll go up bow now. So again, nice and weight, relax the shoulders, and then up. I had mentioned the kinks earlier before, and again, this will help you get rid of those kinks. So with that in mind, actually, let's go back and now play that same D major scale with a sustained division of 4, and see how that maybe has already helped your sustained tone. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4. Feel better? Yeah, good. I see some heads nodding. Yeah, kind of magically happens, right? Okay, Good. Good questions. Any others? All right. So, so far we've been doing equal bow divisions. All right, and sometimes you want to be dividing the bow equally, but sometimes you don't. Where would you not want to? Well, if you want to make a crescendo or diminuendo, right? That would be one good reason to not have an equally divided bow. So we'll try this first on an open string of your choosing, but we're going to go from piano to forte, forte to piano. And as you do this, I plan to have use half of the bow for the last note. So I'll show you what I mean by that. Forte. Alright, so let's all try that together. Nice and slow on an open string of your choosing. 3, 4. So we'll try that on a scale. 2, 3, 4. Stop there. I apologize again, I didn't write in the repeat signs, but I'm sure you probably all followed me. Again, you can do that with any, and I suggest you do with any amount of bow divisions. Of course, then the next step, let's try the pulsed version. And for this, again, I think in a matter of time, we will just play exactly as I have written there. So just changing every bar. 2, 3, 4. Good. And now the sustained version. 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, you can get creative with this. You can play with where the dynamics are in the bow. There's no reason you have to start piano. You can start forte and you can do the opposite of it. All right. So let's apply this to a very simple piece. For those of you that have taken Suzuki, you probably will recognize this, the chorus from Judas Maccabeus by Handel. notice if you haven't heard it before. All right. So I've written this out, at least the first 2 lines of it for all of us. So let's just try reading this together. And perhaps a little bit slower than what I just played it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. Nice little melody, and it's I think a very useful one to put this broken bows into practice for repertoire. So again, the even distribution of the bow will lead to an even sustained sound. So for most of this, we want a nice sustained sound. So the way I would go about practicing something like this, and of course you can apply this to any repertoire that you're working on, where you want to really plan out your bow division for your musical conception again. So I've written out the bow divisions. So I would practice it. Okay, so let's try this all together. And for our purposes right now, we're trying to be as dry, I guess, as possible, and as exact as possible and even with the bow distribution. 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. All right, so let's take the next step of this. Uneven bow distribution. So we're going to add some phrasing into this, right? And I've just highlighted measure 3. So this is musically what we're trying to achieve, just a nice crescendo diminuendo. Da 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 dum bum bum. So let's practice that measure 3. So in the same way that we were working on it with the scale, all right. So 1, 2, 3. Aim for the middle of the bow for that last one. 4, back, less. Okay? So let's try that together. Again, we're going to go nice and slow. 4 and. So let's try it one more time. 4 and. Let's try a little bit quicker. 3 and 4 and. A little bit quicker yet. 3 and 4 and. And up to tempo. 3 and 4 and. And now let's play it as written. So the sustained version. 3 and 4 and. All right, now let me back up. Let's play that melody again, and let's concentrate on this measure, measure 3, making that crescendo diminuendo happen. 3 and 4 and. Okay. And then finally we've achieved our phrasing goal. So let me again open this up to questions. How can I help? No questions? Someone's got to have questions here. Oh, there we go. Go ahead. Is that Bruce? Yeah.
Yeah. What role do you see how far the bow is from the bridge? How do you decide when you're bowing close to the bridge, getting close to scratchy, or when you're going farther from the bridge and closer to spooky?
Great. Fantastic question. So there's some general principles of string playing that we could talk about. Generally speaking, the slower the bow, the more pressure, the closer to the bridge you want to be. All right. Also, then, if you look at your violin, your cello, your viola, what are you doing when you're putting your finger down on the string? Well, you're shortening the string length, essentially, right? So you really have to bear that in mind when you start playing higher and higher in positions, okay? And I think this is something that people maybe don't pay enough attention to. I'm trying to get a good angle so that you can see. But if, say, you were to play in a very high position, whatever note you want, right? If I were to play in the middle of the bow here, or even closer to the fingerboard, it's going to get a very bad sound, right? And you probably already know that. That would be like playing an open string with my bow over here somewhere, right? You have to think about that proportion. So as you go higher and higher, the closer to the bridge you need to play. That makes sense, I think, right? Yeah, and actually, the higher you play, the less forgiving the instrument will be, right? And at least for violinists, we practice flesh scales a lot, and some of them go quite high. Well, the reason for that isn't just for your left hand to be able to play in positions, but it's also for your right hand to figure out where your contact needs to be for those higher positions, right? And it also on thinking about that too, the more you do practice those scales in higher positions, the more control you'll have over your bow, because like I said, it is less forgiving, right? I found lately I've had to play in a mask a lot. It can make it a little bit tricky, because it wants to sneak up and you can't really see your bow on the violin like you're used to. But the more you practice it in front of the mirror, the better and more confident you'll feel with that too, because it'll just start to become a feeling that you don't have to think about so much. Great question. I hope that answered that.
Yes, indeed.
Any other questions? No? Sabrina?
I was wondering if having any like rosin on the string would affect the contact point.
Rosin?
Yeah, if you have like excess rosin on the string.
Well, with rosin, let's see. my kind of philosophy with rosin is to put just enough on as you need, but without overdoing it. I think less is more, right? Sometimes, you know, I'll see somebody, they'll be playing and it's like it's snowing in front of their instrument, right? Whoa, way too much rosin, right? If you find you have too much rosin, what you can do, you can just take your thumbnail under the bow and kind of flick it out, right? That can get it cleaned. Eventually, though, you'll have to get a rehair, right? But rosin shouldn't be a band-aid for something else.
But if it's on the violin strings, like if it's like on the violin strings though.
Oh, to clean it, you mean?
Yeah, like if you have like rosin on the violin strings, like would that mess up your contact point?
Probably not. More that would is if you have old strings, and I can feel it on my violin too. My strings are pretty old. Well, I shouldn't say they're that old, but I do a lot of playing, so they get worn out easily. And if you have a fresh set of strings, you can really play on top of the bridge much more easily. It depends on your violin too, though. You know, if you're lucky enough to have a $16 million Strat or Del Jesu, you know, sometimes, you know, I've played instruments where you can literally play on top of the bridge and get a glorious sound, right? So there's a lot of factors involved with that. Also, you know, with your bow hair, how old it is, because the bow hair will wear over time. I guess there's, you know, little barbs on those hairs that creates the friction. So when those get worn down too much, you're gonna have to. That'll change your contact point as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hi, John, this is Claire again. This might be a little too complicated question for the time that we have left, but I've been thinking about listening to a lot of cello talk kind of things where talk about how you move your body to get the weight of the instrument and the weight of the bow to follow, to make the weight be appropriate where you are and to kind of move your body at the same time. Do you have any thoughts on that, on body movement and weight of the bow and how you control that?
Absolutely, and that's a great subject to get into, and I think I can sum it up in a couple of minutes actually. So, and some of my students I think are in the audience and have heard this over and over from me, but I'll repeat it to all of you. You know, there's good motion and then there's harmful motion in playing, and you want to be aware of both. Okay, it's maybe a little bit different for cello, but I'll go through just kind of briefly some of these. This motion you see a lot with people, right? And I see some heads nodding. Yeah. Productive or counterproductive for sound production? That was a lot of uses of the word production. Counterproductive, right? Right? There's a couple reasons why. One of them is just simply gravity. Right, your bow can slip. But also, we talk about arm weight in playing. And what does arm weight in playing refer to? It's not down vertical weight, but rather horizontal weight that you want to cultivate, right? When you're pressing down, that's when you get scratchy sounds. When you use horizontal weight, I think of a wrecking ball into a side of a wall instead of on top. That's the kind of weight that you want, right? And when you're moving like this, your arm has to constantly be compensating for where your violin is, all right? So that's counterproductive. More productive is this motion, horizontal motion, okay? So there's two options I'll give you. One is moving the bow with the violin at the same time. And you guys feel free to try this too if you want. Do a couple bows, doing the same direction. All right? Then the other one is the opposite of that. Moving your, as you say, go down bow, out to the left. comment there. Which one do you think is more beneficial for sound production? The first one or the second one? Who, you can raise your hand. Who votes for the first one? Nobody. Good. Okay. Yes, the second one. All right. You know, if you watch Pinchas Zuckerman is a good example. If you watch him playing, he's always right. He's always making that motion, and it helps if you think of like a. If you remember the movie The Goonies from way back in the day, there's a stretchy machine, you know, that the brothers was using. So feeling like you're stretching a rubber band. Okay. Now I'm not advocating that every single down bow you go this way and every single up bow you go this way, because that would be absolutely ridiculous if you're playing, you know, Last Movement of Tchaikovsky Concerto. But but it can help in sustained tones. Help really pull at the end of the bow. All right. So those are two, or the thought I had about good motion versus bad motion, because you know we need motion when we're playing, and it's an important thing to think about, especially even before you play, right? I mean, as string players, I think we all too often will start like this, and it's very abrupt. But you want to think about how you get into that first note, because once you get that first note, the other ones have a way of just falling in line, shall I say, right? I always think if you're playing, starting on a down bow, prep with an up bow. All right. So I hope that was helpful and answered the question, at least to some degree.
Yes, it was helpful.
One thing I kind of wanted also to just briefly touch upon, because I mentioned it in the beginning, is how your left hand and your right hand can work together. All right. I'm going to put my violin down for this, and you might want to do the same. You're going to need your both hands free though for this basic exercise. So we're going to do some air bowing, air playing, and I'm going to ask you to do something kind of strange. All right. Well, in a bit I will. So shifting and bow speed. This is where this is going. So I want you to do a down bow and a shift towards you. Cellist, it would be this. All right, just feel that motion like your arms are on a string. Okay, so that's one option for shifting. And the other option would be the opposite of that. So up bow and shifting towards you. Okay? So now, I'm going to ask you to do something very strange. I want you to try and move your left hand shift faster than your right arm bow. It probably feels really awkward, right? It's unnatural. So if you apply that to the instrument, you want to think when you can to use your arms together, so shifting at the same speed as your bow, right? It also makes sense musically. Instead of, right, it doesn't quite fit. All right, so when you're practicing your scales and your shifting, and I know Dr. Buchholz back in October did a shifting exercise, and some of you were there for that. Try and see if you can use your arms together though, and feeling the same speed in your shifts as your bow speed. Okay, so that's one example of how your right arm can influence your left arm. And to that effect, you've probably had a situation where you felt terribly uncomfortable with a shift, uncomfortable with your left hand maybe in general. The first place I always start with that is my bow distribution, because oftentimes just having good bow distribution will alleviate that and make the shift that much more comfortable and ergonomic. Okay, not all the time, but more often than not, I found it's the most useful thing to at least start with. Suze has a question. Susie.
Just Suze. I wanted to ask for tips and tricks, but what I really mean is exercises to improve technique for double stops, and then the opposite of it, not hitting other strings accidentally. Especially on the cello, when you're shifted into a really high position, you're depressing the string so much, it's really easy to hit the string next door.
So the first part was about tips and tricks for exercise for double stops?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think with that, you can apply the same exercises we just went through. I think would be useful for double stops. And when you're doing that, watching your bow and being sure that you're grabbing both strings at the same time and not going on until you do. All right. As far as watching, as far as not hitting other strings, again, I think these exercises will help with that. For me, that's largely has to do with contact point. So making sure you have the right contact point. Again, if I play this and I'm too close to, say, the fingerboard, not only is it a bad sound, but it's I'm hitting the open D string as well. All right, so really paying attention to that. There's, I'm sure, a whole host of etudes for that as well. One for violins, violas I can think of. My default etude would be Kreutzer number 7. And again, my students all know that very well by now. Good. Any other questions here? Oh, Bruce had a question for Brian about your viola. Brian has a really interesting viola. I know it. I've seen it. I've heard it. Played it. Brian, if you want to explain it, feel free to. Yeah, I believe it's. I forget the name of the instrument, but there's sympathetic vibrations. The strings underneath will vibrate sympathetically with the top strings. I forget the name of the instrument, but that's what that is.
So you only bow some of the strings, but the other ones vibrate all by themselves? That is the weirdest thing I have. Can you like hold it up in front of the camera?
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
All right. Well, the instrument you were talking about is not this one. That's another one. That one has five primaries and 5 sympathetics. This one doesn't have any sympathetics.
Can you show Brian's music, Brian's picture? How do you get Brian's picture just so people can see the instrument?
We can pin. We can sort of tap on Brian's picture, then we get to see it big. Yeah. Okay. So I can see that. That looks fantastic.
All right. It has 7 primaries. So it covers the entire range of violin, viola, and cello, and actually even goes down to the B below the cello C.
Unbelievable.
Of course, it's a bear to play only one string at a time, because you got 7 strings over the same curvature.
Wow. Is that a custom that you got built for yourself?
I had a local luthier named Paul Mell make it for me.
That's incredible. So what do you call it? Is that Brian's viola or viola?
Well, I have a series of these. For instance, I have a viola which has 6 strings, 6 primaries. And so that covers the range of the viola and the cello. And I decided I also wanted one that would also cover the violin. I would not play these in a concert because it's too easy to slop over into another string.
Also, it probably takes too long to tune on stage.
It has all of these fine tuners, so it's not too bad.
So,
Well, thank you.
Any other questions about bowing or anything to do with technique? I'm happy to, stick around for a couple minutes.
Do you have time for one more question that's not about bowing or fingering or anything?
Sure.
What is Jimi Hendrix's influence on you?
To be honest, I really like the sketch. I inherited it a couple years ago, and I actually have him there. John Lennon is right across.
Oh, okay.
Who I of course grew up listening to his music. Other people in my music room are Bartok. There's a picture of Bartok and his friend Kodai, and they're across from each other, looking at each other. And Bartok is one of my heroes as a composer. In fact, we were listening to his opera, Bluebeard's Castle, which was broadcast on the Met yesterday.
Oh, that is very cool. Thank you for answering all my odd questions.
My pleasure. My pleasure. All right. Well, again, thank you guys for being here. I hope this was informative, useful. Feel free, my information is on the website if you want to get in touch with me at any point. Also, check out our website. We're going to be doing more of these in the winter, so we're now just trying to plan for that. So stay tuned for updates. Make sure you sign up for our mailing, and you can do that all at our website, www.nepacms.org, as well as sign up for the concert, which will be broadcast next weekend. Wonderful program. Two composers. The first is Joseph Jongen, a Belgian composer, little known outside of the organ world actually, but wrote some beautiful music for strings, as well as Johannes Brahms. We're doing the horn trio, which is a trio originally for horn, cello, and piano. However, Brahms wrote a cello part that went with it originally to substitute for the horn. However, 20 years later, he went to his editor and said, I hate the sound of the cello with this piece, but I love the sound of the viola. So can you please, here's my viola version of the horn trio. So it's a version that Brahms himself wrote out. So anyway, again, thank you for being here. Have a wonderful evening, and I look forward to seeing you all in 2021. Take care.
Thank you.